a lot of questions about this interview with the director of Canada's spy agency, where he said,
I would absolutely not recommend someone have TikTok.
Many of you pointed out that Google and Meta also have access to your personal data, so why is TikTok being singled out here? Much of the worry some cybersecurity experts have is around the amount of information TikTok gathers, how transparent they are about that, and the perception that the Chinese government could access that data. Let's start with what TikTok knows about you. According to the cybersecurity experts I spoke to, the app collects a similar amount of data as Google and Meta.
TikTok does collect information on people, both through the app service and through your algorithm in your account. But as many of your viewers have raised, none of this is information that is different than the kinds of information many other tech companies collect about us.
I also spoke to a researcher at the University of Toronto's Citizen Lab. The research group studied the privacy and security of ByteDance, the Chinese-based company that owns TikTok. And it looked at Douyin. That's the version available in China. That 2021 report found that TikTok mostly aligns with the same amount of data other social media apps might collect, like Google and Meta. That includes location tracking from things like your Wi-Fi, your IP address, and what you search. Many social media apps also collect your engagement time on posts or videos. However, that researcher's report also showed that Douyin shares data that is one step further from other apps. It tracks a user's MAC address, which is a unique identifier that comes with the device that cannot be reset. While TikTok doesn't collect this data, he worries that because the codes look similar on TikTok and Douyin, there's room for mistakes to be made.
If there is such code and such code gets accidentally activated, user privacy and security are harmed.
But he says that has not been observed in the TikTok app. Another reason TikTok might be singled out comes down to security laws in China. China's data security law asks companies that store data in China to share that data with the Chinese government if requested. These requests are related to national security. And you've probably seen a lot of concern not only from the Canadian government, but also the US and EU over privacy protection.
We have a problem with privacy, but we have a larger security problem that relates directly to China, and that puts TikTok in the crosshairs.
So is there as big of a security risk as Canada's spy agency says there could be? And why not focus on other Chinese-owned apps?
I don't think it's a security threat. That isn't to say that social media can't be misused in ways that would be damaging to our democratic process.
The risk is relatively small for your average user, but that's not saying there's no risk.
TikTok has denied it has shared information with the Chinese government and has said its servers are outside of China and beyond the control of the Chinese Communist Party. It says it follows Canadian data protection and privacy laws. In a statement issued in May, Daniel Morgan, a spokesperson for TikTok in Canada, called the CSIS director's statements unsupported by evidence. It went on to say that TikTok has never shared Canadian user data with the Chinese government, nor would it if asked. That said, the Canadian government is worried about foreign interference. And this cybersecurity expert says that's informing fears about TikTok's use. Last year, it was banned on Canadian government employee devices.
A lot of the argument against TikTok has been based on the possibility of foreign governments being able to blackmail individuals or target individuals, try to use them as moles, try to get information from them and target them in like phishing attacks or other hacking attacks. Those are valid concerns. Those are real things that can happen. While those are valid concerns, they are also valid concerns from other groups, including our own governments.
And that's true. There's a long history of large tech companies like Google and Meta who have handed over information to law enforcement based on legal requests. Both companies display the number of requests they've received from governments on their website. These requests are based on the laws in any country that allow for data to be shared for national security purposes or for the safety of an individual, for example. And even though this might happen at home, the experts I spoke to told me that governments like Canada and the US are specifically concerned about what the Chinese government could do with data from TikTok. And that's because of its popularity. According to a report from the Pew Research Center earlier this year, TikTok is the fastest growing social media app in the US. Another report done by Toronto Metropolitan University shows that TikTok has the fastest rate of growth among Canadians.
TikTok is incredibly popular, and in some ways it is a competition to a lot of US companies that are in the same market.
If it is a tool that can be used for nefarious purposes by the Chinese government, then it could, in theory, do a lot of damage if, for example, China were to generate misinformation at election time.
Diab also says that this meddling could be done without the use of TikTok. In fact, the Chinese government has already been accused of interfering in Canada's elections in 2019 and 2021, which prompted a national inquiry. Earlier this year, that inquiry found that there were acts of electoral interference and that China stands out as the most persistent and sophisticated foreign interference threat to Canada. But there's no evidence to suggest that TikTok has been involved in helping the Chinese government to meddle or shared any data with Beijing. And those cybersecurity experts say this discussion and focus on TikTok points to the need for better data regulation regulation for all social media apps. So far, the European Union is the furthest ahead when it comes to data regulation. Canada's Online Harms Act, which was introduced in February, is expected to impose new responsibilities on social media platforms.